All right, welcome, session 2. Welcome back to those who made it back, that I didn't scare away with the alphabet, and that we can work together here. This session will also be more, I think we'll get into the meat of some interesting things about how the language impacts translation and understanding, about scriptures and other things. So we're going to start, like I said, with the alphabet and with our names. And so I'm going to stop the share for just a moment and talk about writing out our names in Greek letters using the sounds. And there are some sounds that aren't captured in the Greek alphabet, right? And so if your name includes one of those sounds, you might have to get a little creative. And there are some ways that some of these can be captured and some of them just can't. And so I'll be interested to see what you think. But my first name is Brett, and so I'll go first. I'll share mine. Let me put it on. My first name is Brett, so my first name is spelled like this in Greek. So I capitalized the beta, and then I have a rho, which looks like a P, but it's a rho, an R sound. And then epsilon makes the S sound, and then tau. So Brett. And I threw in accents where I thought they belonged. You don't need to put accents, but I was just trying to be like as close as I could. And then my middle name, here, I'm going to do my whole name. You don't need to, but I thought like to show different sounds. My middle name is Meredith. So here is how I felt like Meredith would be written. That's a mu, epsilon, rho, epsilon, delta, iota, and theta for the final TH. Now, my last name is Wilson. Some of you have W's in your name, or another letter, which could be captured like a J, by a different set of letters in Greek. And so the closest thing to the W sound in ancient Greek is this, an upsilon, a U sound with a rough breathing mark that makes a H sound at the beginning. So hui, like a hui. So that's about as close as you can get to a W in ancient Greek, would be an upsilon with a rough breathing. Or if it's in the middle of a word, then you would do upsilon iota like this to make one sound like a will. So Wilson, upsilon, iota, lambda, that's an sigma that's in the middle, an S that's in the middle of a word, looks like this. It's hard to do that backwards. And then omicron, and then nu, the N there. Who wants to show their name? Anybody want to be bold and try it out and show their piece of paper? There's Bill's. All right, so we've got beta, iota, lambda, sigma, good capital sigma, and then he's got a key, or we sometimes say chi, for the CH, iota, lambda, I, iota, and then nu, and then you've got a gamma there at the end. I think your gamma needs a loop below the line, Bill. And then your iotas look very nice for English eyes, but they would really confuse a Greek person because the iota doesn't get a dot over the top of it. So, that's why I write my eyes in English without a dot. So I make the mistake the other way. But Bill, you're muted. Let me see if. Bill, you're muted. I can't hear you.
The iota has a little J underneath, right below the line. It comes sort of down a little bit.
It can, but we're also going to complicate the iota later. But generally, it's above the line. Sometimes it's written. It depends on the font you're looking at, if you're looking at it printed, whether it's below the line.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks. Who else wants to give a try? All right, there's Sophie. So if you pull up Sophie, I'm going to ask Sophie to unmute so that we can see hers pinned up here.
I did purely phonetic because I have silent letters in my name, so.
Right. Sophie, gimme. So sigma, omicron, phi, iota, gamma, good capital letters here, iota, nu, iota. Very good. I think that's right.
The French called my last letter the Y, and the Y. It's a Greek I, but it wouldn't be pronounced that way. Putting an epsilon there didn't make sense. So.
Right. Yeah, it would be a little different in Greek there. So nice work. Yeah. Anybody else want to give it a try with their name? Or do you have like a hard name that you're like, I don't know how you would write my name, and you would like help with it?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure how to do that. Any alphabet that doesn't have a J in it can't be all right.
Yeah.
I've seen Julius Caesar started with an I.
That's right. Yeah.
That's kind of where I went. I don't know if you can make this out or not.
Yep. Oh, good. You did kind of a phonetic as well. So good. Capital iota, alpha, nu, and then your last name, if you can move it over a little bit. Yeah. And move it up a little bit. There we go. Iota, upsilon, lambda, phi, and then, yeah, that's interesting because, yeah, it looks weird to have all those consonants in a row, but that's how your name sounds and is spelled. So phi and then sigma. Good job, John Jules. Yeah, the J is, when we have a J at the beginning of the word in English, we do in Greek, just like in Latin, start it with an I, with an iota. And so it makes more of a y sound in those languages. I saw somebody else holding up a piece of paper a minute ago. Taylor. Can you unmute, Taylor, so we can see yours? There we go. Good. Oh, you even did accents. Nice.
I felt like the accent was required because otherwise it like kind of changes like the pronunciation a little.
Right. So. Yeah, good use of the eta for the A sound. Taylor, are you Taylor Ray?
I am Taylor Ray.
Taylor Ray.
Name.
There you go.
And actually all of my siblings, so.
Oh, neat. Taylor Ray Oster.
Oh, okay. So actually,
see, that's the thing. Yeah, this is an Oster.
So how would I do a long O?
That would be an omega. So like do you know what the capital omega looks like?
One sec.
It's like a horseshoe. So the lowercase omega for the long O sound is a W, curly W. Yes, there you go. Now we pronounce your name correct. Yes, good. Oster. Good. Taylor Ray, we're learning about each other too. You now know my middle name. There we go. My initials are BMW, but not in Greek. So anybody else want to give a try? Okay. Well, unmute if you do. Okay. Andy. Yeah, good to see you, Andy.
Good to see you.
Coming to us from Lancaster, PA, right?
Right.
So good, Andy. So alpha, nu, delta, upsilon. Yeah, I think E. I would maybe put a long iota at the end of your name.
A long iota.
Yeah, and then Nisli. You would just put an iota, and then we would know to pronounce it. When it's at the end of the word, it's generally long like that. Okay. So anybody with an E sound at the end of their name would be like that too. But nice, yeah, Andy Nisli, nice work.
So I always have trouble with my name in language classes because my name only exists in English.
Yeah, Jill. So yeah, you have iota. Can you hold it a little more in the middle of the screen? There we go. Yep. Yeah, it's hard because Jill, you have the sound, so it's like iota, lambda. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Good work.
So, and I try my middle name, and so that's like that way.
Yeah.
I was not ambitious enough to try my last name because it's Greek.
Yeah, Schwartz does not translate to Greek, I'll tell you.
Oh,
No,
no.
no, it does not. Andy, did you have a question? Didn't mean to cut you off there.
Would I do the long iota also at the end of Nisly or no?
I think so. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was the question. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome. And good job with the sigmas. That's the right sigma. So nice work. All right, we'll keep going here. So tonight, what we're gonna do to get started is in the slides ahead, you're gonna see some Greek words come up and we're gonna sound them out together. So I'm gonna be silent for a moment and let you just look at the Greek word and try to sound it out so that we practice pronouncing them. And then I'll show you the translation or the English name. These are almost all proper nouns, they're names, because that's a good way to practice that you already know some Greek and you know, and that can be a helpful way to get into the pronunciation and seeing the structure of the word. And as we go through these, we're going to go through these twice. So we're going to go all the way through them just looking at the words and then pronouncing them. But as we go through them the first time, I want you to think about what varies about these different Greek words. What differences or patterns do you see? And what do you wonder about? Okay, it'll make sense. And here's the first one. So who do you think this is? We showed this one briefly last time. Also, I'll note one thing as we start this. This is the Greek Times New Roman font, but in Greek there are 3 accents. This one, that one, and then the circumflex. But some fonts don't have the circumflex that's like a little round. And so when they don't have that accent, they put the, what's that called in Spanish? You know, the other one. Yes, on there instead. So this is our first proper name, and it is Jesus. Jesus. In Greek, pronunciation would be more like that. Jesus. Jesus. I'm showing you kind of the dictionary format of this, and so we'll talk more about why and what that looks like here. Think about and try to pronounce this one to yourself. This one is Christos, Christos. And that, of course, is the word for Christ, but often actually, interestingly, gets translated Messiah or other ways, sometimes even translated Lord. Who's this? Paulos. Yeah, Paul. This is Paul, right. Yeah, so thanks, Andy. And I'm gonna start inviting you guys now to like give each other a couple beats, and then you can unmute or when I ask you and chime in. So think about who this one is, pronounce it to yourself. Who's this? You can unmute.
Petros.
Petros. And who do you think that is?
Peter.
This is Peter. Petros. It's also the word for rock. Rock.
Can I ask what the OVO at the end is?
It's a part of the dictionary listing for nouns. So good question. And that's a part of what I want you to be noticing the patterns of. So I'll talk about why words look like this in the dictionary in a little bit. This one, try to sound it out. Somebody want to try pronouncing it?
Ionis, John.
Yes.
How do we know when to use the Omicron versus the Omega and the Eta and the Epsilon? I'm so confused by that.
Yeah, I mean, really, we're not inventing our own Greek words, right? So we're just trying our best to pronounce them. Transliteration is kind of made up in a way, but But I think going back to learning the alphabet by pronouncing the letters names as they are pronounced. So omega versus omicron. And that's maybe one that I didn't make as much of a distinction about last time. So omega, so this would be, depending on how you pronounce the iota, which like in different periods of history, this got pronounced different ways, but the Ioannes, Ioannes, John. So the eta, this one that looks like an N, eta makes the A sound, whereas omicron, see, I did it again. Omicron makes an aw sound. So omega versus omicron. It's the long O versus short O. Mm-hmm.
What is the significance of the double news, I guess that is?
Yeah, it's just how they wrote it. And that's how the word name is spelled. So we're going to be noticing how the Greek spellings vary quite a bit from the English in some cases. So I'm trying to think of another language where they have a form of this name that's written with two N's. I mean, we say Johnny, but that's different. But
I think Johann, maybe.
Yeah. Johannes is the German
Yeah, Johann.
or Dutch version, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Johannes.
Mm-hmm. Let's keep going. What about this one? Take a minute to pronounce it to yourself. Who wants to give it a try to pronounce it?
Is it Galilea?
Yes, Galilea. Galilea, which is, Galilee. Galilee. A friend of mine who's a pastor named his daughter this, Galilee. So, Galilee. Galilea would be the Greek pronunciation. This one. Who wants to give it a try? Pronouncing this one.
Abraham?
Whoever spoke second was a little closer in some ways. You both kind of had parts of the word correct. Abraham, Abraham. And if you're still getting tripped up here by the rho here, the R sound, think of it as like a lowercase r, but they kept going too far when they're writing it and they made a P. So, Abraham. Try this one. Who wants to give this one a try? Don't be ashamed to sound it out or make a mistake.
Phariseos?
Phariseos. Yeah, very good, Sophie. So fa, ri, sai. This A, alpha plus iota makes an I sound. Os, Phariseos.
So, Brett, in Galilea, it was an alpha iota and then a different accent. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good catch. And that told us that the pronunciation is a little different. This one. Who wants to try it?
Maria?
Yeah. Maria. Yeah. Mary. And Mary is really in Hebrew, Miriam, and so many languages have different versions of this name, but that's how it looks in Greek. Here's this one. Anybody want to try this one?
Yosef?
Yosef. Good job. Yosef. Yosef.
So the accent over the eta there makes it short. Is that correct? And why not just write an epsilon?
Yeah, I think you're right, Tony. The accent there can make it short, and eta before phi often has a shorter because of the way that syllabifies. But I think you're right. It should be a little closer to the long sound. So Yosef. Joseph, of course. We have Mary and Joseph. And then this one. When two vowels make one sound, that's called a diphthong. It's not a Greek thing, it's a language thing. When two vowels make one sound, it's called a diphthong. In Greek, we can tell that they're making one sound if like an accent, or in this case, at the beginning of the word, the breathing mark, which is the one that looks like a quotation mark, is put on the second letter. That tells us that these are functioning as one. And alpha iota makes an I sound. So this word is going to start with the sound I.
Is it
Go ahead.
Is it Aegyptos?
Yeah,
Like
it's Egypt, right? Aegyptos, that upsilon would make kind of an sound. Aegyptos. Aegyptos. I'm trying to get to all the letters here, but I don't think I hit them all. What's this one? Who wants to try it? We haven't seen this letter too much yet.
Nazareth?
But interestingly here, as opposed to in English, the final sound is a tau rather than a theta, a th. So in Greek here, it's Nazareth. 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 Yep, and in English, of course, Nazareth. Oh, I didn't change this slide. That's Nazareth. I just kept duplicating my slides and forgot to choose that one. All right, this one's not a proper name in Greek, but it's a word. You want to try it? You kind of already know this word, and I think we might have mentioned it last time, but just try pronouncing it first. Who wants to pronounce it? It's a kappa, upsilon, rho, iota, sigma.
Curious?
Kurios, kurios. And this is the word for Lord, which in English is capitalized when we have this in Greek in the Bible. Kurios is capitalized. Interestingly, though, in the manuscript tradition, as well as in like even just Greek New Testaments, kurios is not ever capitalized in Greek, but we do capitalize it often in English when we're referring to Jesus. Sidebar, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, in English translations, when you see capital L-O-R-D, that is the holy name of God in Hebrew, the four-letter tetragrammaton. That's a separate thing. We're not learning Hebrew tonight. But this kurios, from which we get the word Kyrie, because Kyrie, with a different ending, with an eta ending, is the first word of that part of the liturgy in Greek. And a part of a lot of ancient prayers start with this word for Lord, kurios.
Brett, is now okay to ask about like the transliteration convention? Like why do we write it KY? It's a KI sound.
Yeah, that comes to us from Latin. So a lot of this actually gets messed up or, mixed in by Latin, because most things in Greek didn't come to us directly from Greek to English. They came to us Greek, Latin, English. And even though Latin doesn't have a Y either, when they spelled things certain ways in Latin, then that caused them to spell them in different ways in English. And when people are translating from Greek to English, oddly, they throw in lots of Y's. And even though Greek doesn't have a Y.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, the next one is close to an English word, but this is a Greek. It's a proper name in the English translation of the Bible you see it a lot, but it's a Greek noun. It's not a proper name, and it's never capitalized in Greek, but it's always capitalized in the English translations of the Bible. But first, just try to pronounce it. What is this?
Ethnos, people, right?
Ethnos, yeah. Ethnos, people. I should have had you guess. Yeah, it's the word for people or a nation, but we generally see it in the New Testament as plural. And when it's plural, it means the nations, and it means everybody else but the Jewish people. And in that case, it gets translated as Gentiles. So this is the word that gets translated as Gentiles, even though it's not a proper name. And it means everybody else. So we have this English word Gentiles to mean non-Jews, and that's what it is in the Greek Bible. All right, now.
So in Matthew, at the very end, where Jesus commands the disciples to go out baptizing all people, and I think it speaks to all nations.
In all nations.
This would be the term.
I don't know. That's interesting. I'd want to double check whether it's ethnos or another word that it means like all peoples. There are a few different words for like, there wasn't an ancient construction of race as in like skin color in that way, but there are other words in Greek that get translated like race or nation or people. And so there are other words. So that'd be a good little Bible study thing, that now that you kind of have these tools, and I'm going to show you before the end of session tonight, a great website we're going to use it to go to with questions just like that, where it shows you the Greek and you can hover over any word and it'll tell you everything you need to know. So now, what did you notice about these words as I showed them to you? I'm going to flip back through them and go back to the beginning and leave some space for you to think about what you notice about these. Okay.
They're all nouns.
These are all nouns. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. What else? Those of you who have taken a language before, and don't feel intimidated if that isn't you. Do you have a guess about why they're written like this in the dictionary format? Why these nouns are written like this? It's common to other languages that have this grammatical style.
Sophie mentioned maybe they're all nominative form.
Yeah, I saw a bunch of you unmute. Right. This is this is common with languages that decline their nouns or have inflected noun endings. And so this is the nominative form, the subject form of the noun when you look up in a dictionary. And then the second one in Greek is the genitive. And then when you look up a Greek noun, the third part that we see here is actually the article that tells us the gender of the word. So the first article that we have here is just the letter Omicron with a rough rhythm mark, which we would say in Hellenistic Greek, this is more ho. In modern Greek, this is more ho. But in Biblical Greek and the time of Koine Greek, this is ha. Because Omicron is that soft O, like we were talking about with Taylor's name. So this is ha, is the word for the that tells us that this is a masculine noun. We're going to talk more about that, but just notice these as we go through. We're going to go again through these nouns just to get familiarity with them and say them again to ourselves. So, Jesus, 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 and I'm just going to run through these real quick. Christos, Christ. Paulos, Paulos, Paul. Petros, Petros, Peter. Ioannes, Ioannes, John. Galilee, Galilea, Galilee. Abraham, Abraham. Oh, I should have gone back. On Galilee, we had an example of a feminine noun. And so we see here not the ha, the omicron, but we see the hey. The eta, a sound with a h at the front is a hey. So that's the feminine definite article that just tells us it's a feminine word, is that. You don't need to know that. I mean, I'm just trying to point things out. This one, Pharisaios, Pharisaios, Pharisee, that should be singular. Maria, Maria, Mary. Yosef, Yosef, Yosef. Welcome, Joseph, by the way. You joined a little bit ago, and welcome to Ryan, who joined. You'll catch up on the beginning later. Aiguptos, Aiguptos, Egypt. Nazareth, Nazareth. By the way, you can roll your R's or not in Greek. Egypt. Kurios, Kurios. Lord, Kurios. Ethnos, Ethnos. Nation in the plural Gentiles. So here's what I want to talk about. Again, nothing you have to memorize, but because we want to get into the why. Why do these things matter? Why does grammar matter with these languages? Gender, because, let me see. I think I missed something earlier. Let me just flip back. Okay, no, I didn't. That comes later in my slides. Gender, Greek nouns have gender. So as we've seen, we have masculine, feminine, and neuter nouns, and we'll come into more contact with those in a minute. But this is grammatical gender, not biological, which matters, especially when we're talking about, like, comes up right now and all the time, and when scripture is still used as something with authority about people's lives and about gender, and when we're talking about an ancient language that had different understandings of gender, and we're taking an ancient scripture, an ancient language with different things, and we're applying it to our current context. We need to remember that this is grammatical gender, not biological, but like in other languages that gender their words, sometimes it's revealing of cultural understandings in their patterns. And so it was interesting. I did some additional research on this beforehand, because a lot of people find it, not to say that it's a theological definite, but a lot of people find it relevant that whereas the words for God in Greek, theos, and father, of course, are masculine nouns, grammatically masculine nouns. A lot of people find it relevant or meaningful to them that a lot of the words in both Hebrew and Greek for spirit are feminine, including the words for Holy Spirit and wisdom, which is often a personification of the Holy Spirit in some of the script books of the Bible. But other biblical scholars would say that doesn't matter. That's not a relevant piece of information. But we notice these trends, and they can be interesting or relevant or revelatory. Bill Mounts wrote a lot of Greek language instruction, is a scholar of biblical Greek, but he also comes from a more conservative theological tradition. And so he would say gender is never relevant when talking about Greek words. But it can be because also in Greek, not only nouns, but adjectives have gender. So adjectives have gender, so you've like a feminine form of the word for good. The word for good can be masculine, feminine, or neuter. So if you say, that's good, and you use a masculine form, then it implies that you're referring to something masculine. In grammar, not necessarily biology, but these things, as you can imagine, might have some implications when we're translating. Because English doesn't have that, do we lose some flavor? I don't know. Any translation from one language to another changes it. But anyway, I put on the screen, and you've probably already read it, but I'll read it aloud. Bill Mounts says the best illustration of this is the Greek, how it's grammatical gender, not necessarily says anything about the word's meaning, is that the Greek word for sin and sinner, sin is a feminine word. This would, if it had accents, have a rough breathing mark, that closed or open, I guess, quotation mark. It's pronounced hamartia, but sin is not a feminine trait. Sinner is a masculine noun, hamartolos, and so that one's masculine. And so he's making a point here about that gender is grammatical, not biological, but I would say that it can be an interesting thing and sometimes does have implications in its translation. Because we can tell the difference, for instance, if we're talking about a group of men or a group of women or a mixed group or a non-gendered group of people, depending on the words that are used, just like in any language. So I'm going to keep going, but if you have questions, there will be lots of time for that. So a little more grammar first to get into some really meaningful, I hope, kind of why it matters by the end of our session tonight. Unlike English, mostly Greek is a highly inflected language, meaning that it has a lot of changing endings, but also prefixes, and super complicated middle of words change in Greek. Whole words change just by how they're used in a sentence. So nouns, let me just continue with what I have on the screen. In Greek, verbs are conjugated, meaning that they change their ending. And nouns, as well as adjectives and articles and participles, are declined with endings that indicate their use in a sentence. Now, I used to teach this all the time. So if you want to go deep on language nerd grammar, I'm here for that. But we're not going to go much into this, and you don't need to feel like you need to go back to diagramming sentences. We're learning for fun here, so take what you find interesting or enjoy and leave the rest. But just a little refresher on your grammar. This sentence is just about noun structure here. Possessive, subject, verbs, the direct object being the part of speech that receives the action of the verb, to the indirect object, like Mary's cousin gave the cake to the child. So the cake is the direct object, child is the indirect object. I promise this is gonna have a like meaning for our life and Bible in a minute. And languages that decline nouns, I haven't studied all of them. Obviously, I've studied Latin, Greek, German, and a couple others that use a little bit less. But the possessive is often in the genitive case, and it is in Greek. The subject is in the nominative case, and the direct object would be in the accusative case and get that ending. And the indirect object would be in the dative case. If it sounds like I'm like just talking words at you, that's okay. This will make more sense in a minute. Does anybody have questions right now? Just like a lot of things I'm gonna throw at you tonight. We're gonna see what sticks, and it's gonna be fun. Some of you are like, I have not thought about direct objects in decades, and others of you are like amazing linguists in your daily life, and both of those are wonderful things. So stay with me here. You're ready for it. Don't be afraid. I'm going to show it to you. It's the endings of the first two declensions for nouns in Greek. We're just going to show it to you so that we can use this like a tool. You don't need to memorize these. There's no test. We're just doing this for fun. Don't look at the bottom right corner of that practice part. We're going to talk about that later in a minute. But I hope you can see the rest of my screen, because I have the like presenter part. I have other things on top of it, which hopefully aren't blocking yours. Here's the thing. Here's in blue the article, the word for thee. So all the blue words in Greek on your screen are just the word for thee. And it comes in this many forms in Greek. This is part of why I like Latin. Latin doesn't even have articles. You don't need articles in a language. Hebrew is even more compact. But here we are in Greek. You get endings for everything. Everything has lots of endings. We got lots of small words in Greek. They are in blue. These are the articles. And then in the black and red text, we have the nouns. And these are the noun forms. And so the noun that we're declining, putting endings on in the feminine, this is first declension. They're just calling it noun pattern here. That's another way to say a declension. The one that we're using as the example in the first column here is the Greek word, try to sound it out with me, agape. Agape. You may have heard this word before. You've probably heard sermons about it. Agape. Does anybody know what that word means? Some of you know.
Love.
Love. And specifically, like godly love, because we've probably heard sermons about that. Agape is love. So this would be, hey, agape would be how it looks if it's the subject. If it's the subject, but it's plural, it would be hi, agapi. If it's love, but it's like of love, so it's the possessive form. So often we would translate that with the word of in English. I just like to put that there as a helping word. So like the words of love. So if I wanted to say of love in that context, I would say tes, agapes. If I wanted to say to or for love, I would use this form. And here we have something new. This, right there, this is a tricky little mark. That, and then I'm gonna stop share for a second. This is what's called the iota subscript. And it's something that actually was made up later because it doesn't appear in most manuscripts, but centuries later, they decided that we needed a way to write this. And so what it is that in earlier Greek and in later Greek, this would have been written like this. I'm probably writing too small for you to see. Let me try that again. I'm writing an eta, which is the N that makes an A sound. I sound like a crazy person. It's an N that makes an A sound. You know, eta. It's your buddy. This one, eta, like we just saw in that ending. Previously, because this is a language that has been used for millennia and is still used today, it would be written as eta, iota. In Koine Greek, for the reasons that they wanted to save paper, that this often kind of didn't translate well on paper and got smudged. So they would later morph this, it got dropped, and then they morph it into this iota subscript. It's basically a silent iota, but it's a way of distinguishing between the forms of the word that could look the same otherwise. So we could pronounce it or not. We're not going to lose sleep about any of these things. Point being, if you see the iota subscript, which in some fonts will look just like a little dash below the vowel, see how it's present across the line here? So when we see that at the end of a word, and it has that funny little thing underneath a vowel, that means that it's the dative form, and that it always gets translated to or for whatever the noun is. So this one, te agape, would be translated to love or for love, or can even be by love, sometimes with the help of a preposition, and so on in those cases. So love, I'm looking at the top of the, going back to the top of the column here. Love as a subject, he agape. Of love, tes agapes. Dative, to or for love, te agape. Accusative, which would be the direct object, tein agapein. Interestingly, English, we don't put endings on the end of our nouns, but we do have some holdover forms of the accusative, like them, him, me. Those are all accusative forms. And so I love grammar, y'all. We could have a separate chat about grammar, but you don't need to know.
Brett, did you say that that was the definite article or the indefinite article?
This is the definite article.
Okay.
Yeah. So here we have the love. And the next column over, the masculine word, ha logos. Ha logos. Who knows what logos is? Or you might say logos. Ha logos. What does that word mean?
A word?
Word, right. Word. So we have the word, and then to logu. This next line down would be of the word, and then to logo would be to or for the word, and then ton logon would be the direct object of the word. So if I want to say he hears, the verb for he hears would be akue. You can see that on the bottom right, akue. He hears the word. Akue ton logon. You don't need to memorize these. That's nice. You're just an adult taking this for fun. But let's practice this. Let's think about this. All right, I've got some practice words down at the bottom right. Let's say we've got love, we've got God, we've got, well, we have word up there too. We have logos, we have word up there as well. And then we have, I gave you the verb for to hear, she, or it hears. So that would be the third person singular, present active indicative of hears. So think about this with me. How would you say, he hears God? He hears God. And you don't need a separate word for he in this example. The he part is understood in the verb, akue. He hears God. The he hears part I already gave to you. Alpha, kappa, omega, upsilon, epsilon, iota, akue. And then what form of how would I say God in this context? Who wants to tell me?
Ton theoson.
Close. You're right with your ending.
That'd be theon.
Theon, right. So we haven't been over this and you don't need to know it. We're just working on recognizing it and kind of seeing patterns, and we're going to talk about why it matters in a second. So with nouns like this, like logos, the omicron sigma gets dropped and then it turns into an omicron u. So akue ton theon. He hears, technically they God. If you would just want to say he hears God, akue theon. You would express in that way. Oddly, sometimes in the Bible, proper nouns sometimes have articles. There are a couple of places where they say the Jesus, and I really enjoyed that, though it never gets translated that way, the Jesus. Let's try the next one, God of love. God of love. How would you say God of love? Anybody want to try that? God of love. I'll try that.
You have to do loves God, right? Agapes theos. Or which way do you do it?
Love. That's correct. Yeah, the word order here could go either way. In the Greek. In English, of course, it matters. You said agapes. Oops. Agapes. What'd you say next, Sophie?
I said theos, but I realized I forgot my article because I took Latin, not Greek.
Well, but it doesn't need one necessarily here. So the God of love would be ha theos agapes. But here we have of love, because we have that ending here on the screen there in the genitive. But if we wanted, this is God of love, theos agapes. If we wanted to say the love of God, and we could say the, how would you say that?
He agape theu.
He agape theu. Very good. He is the definite article the. Agape theu. Yep, good job. So let's talk about why this matters. Well, I had another example. She hears the God of love. So she hears the God of love. She hears the God of love would be akue. She hears the God of love. Anybody want to give that a try? She hears,
Wait, ton teu agapes?
that would be the love of, she hears the love of God. You got your endings right. You got your endings correct. But you flipped it in terms of meaning. So she hears what? The direct object is the one that answers the what question of the verb. So you make the verb into a question, And the direct object is the answer. She hears what? The love, or she hears what? The God. So maybe you did say it correctly. Maybe I had a flip. But I'll talk it out now. So she hears the God. So tone, she hears what? The God, tone, theon, of love. And so we go up to the of line here. Agapes. I think that is what you said, Sophie. I was just looking in my brain. Agapes. She hears the love, the God of love. Also, this is super confusing, but you can tell how, like, that would matter in terms of translation, which is going to bring us to our next point, which is kind of like, why does this matter? So let's look at some Greek and think about how much religion and faith and theology and all these kind of things have been used throughout history, and how much like one little phrase and how we translate it can make a big difference in people's lives or what they believe. So we have this phrase in Greek that's on your screen here. It's not really a problem. It's just a really important phrase, but translating it can be a challenge. This phrase, let's try to sound this out together. This phrase is pisteos, Jesu, pisteos, Jesu, pisteos, Jesu. What does that mean? Does anybody remember what this first word that starts with a P means? Pisteos?
Faith.
Faith, good job. Yeah, this is the word for faith. And then Jesu, who's that? That's Jesus. But Jesus, Jesus, this is not the subject form. So Jesus, he's got an ending on the end of his name. He's Jesu all of a sudden. So we go back here and we're like, Jesu, who's that? Well, that's the genitive, the second line there. I'm trying to find my mouse on the screen. This one is the of form, Jesu, of Jesus. So we have faith of Jesus. Okay, faith of Jesus. This is a really important theological phrase that comes up in the Bible at several places, a couple times in the Gospels, but mainly in Paul's letters. And so in Romans 3:22-23, by the way, this is my favorite Bible verse. If you knew all of my favorite Bible verses, then you would know all of my internet passwords if you knew how I did them, because I don't do them very obviously. But here we have, and this is the website that I'll point you to, and I'll link it in the email that goes out tomorrow if you're curious about looking up a Greek or a scripture, maybe one that's bothered you or that you wonder, like Bill said about the Matthean sending of the nations at the end. What is that word? You can go to the site, type it in at the top, just put in the Bible reference, and then it'll show you the Greek. And then you can run your mouse over it, and
Yeah,
it'll.
you can only still see the slideshow.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. I guess when it hyperlinked, it didn't pop over. Thanks. Okay, so this is the website. And like I was saying at the top, you can put in the Bible reference. I'll link this in the email tomorrow. And then when you pull up a Bible verse and run your mouse over it, it'll show you the meaning and the grammatical parsing of it there. So this is an important word that a lot of theologies and different churches build a lot of their doctrine around. The righteousness, dikaiosune, well, let's go through this and try to pronounce it first. You don't have to be scared. You've learned some Greek alphabet letters. So let's go through this and try to pronounce this first, and then I'll go through and run my mouse over it and we can try to figure it out. And we'll come back to that phrase that I was talking about and why it's so important and challenging in translation and why language matters. Let's try to pronounce this. So let's go word by word. The one we just started with. Dikaiosune. Dikaiosune. Sound along with me. Theu. Dia. Pisteos. Jesu. Christu. Who's that? Jesu Christu. Ace. I want to put my mouse over it, but it's gonna pull up the grammar. Ace, pantas, kai, epi, pantas, tus, pisteontas, gar. I'm in the second line, 4 words in now. Estin, diastole, Pontes, gar, hamarton, kai, who, that's an upsilon with a rough breathing, on time. It's so hard for me to slow these down. Husterutai, tes doxes tu theu. Tes doxes tu theu. All right, this is an important couple of verses. You got that, right? You got all this Greek. This is an important couple of verses. My favorite. The righteousness, theu. This is the genitive there, of God. The righteousness of God. And here's where we come to that important phrase, where translation of this really matters and what we mean. The righteousness of God through, dia is through, pisteos, faith of Jesus. Now, we know that this word pisteos is genitive. It has that ending because it follows this preposition that, as you see above there, when it means through, takes the genitive. So the word that comes right after it is genitive because it's the preposition rules. So this is through the faith in Jesus. So this is about, and the whole theology and the whole church is built on this, that righteousness, which we don't need to unpack what righteousness means theologically, but righteousness of God through faith of Jesus. What does that mean? Faith of Jesus. How do we translate that? It usually gets translated in English as faith in Jesus. Okay, I'm going to go back here to my slides for a second. In Greek, this form of the word that's in the genitive case here can be many things. It can be, like for example, in English, the genitive can do the same thing. It can be both the subject and the object. So meaning you can say like, this is a, I'm trying to think of a good example. This is a, I had examples earlier and then this is like a possessive, meaning the subject is the possession of it. So we could say like, this is Sarah's marker, the marker of Sarah, Sarah's marker, the marker of Sarah, it's Sarah, she's the subject, of Sarah, and she's the subject. It's possessive. Or we could mean the marker of Sarah and use that genitive in English to mean, someone's ringing my doorbell, I'm ignoring it. We could say the marker of Sarah, or like a house of bread, and mean that the house is made of bread, and that it's the object. We could say a marker of Sarah and mean, bizarrely, that the marker is made of Sarah. It could be a subject or an object use. Now, when we talk about the faith of Jesus, pisteos Jesu, are we talking about Jesus's faith? He's the subject, it's possessive. Or are we talking about faith in Jesus, which is a different type of genitive? Or are we talking about, and faith in Jesus is kind of like the object use of that? Or are we talking about Jesus's faithfulness? So there are these kind of two parts of it. And which one does it mean? Basically, the whole church has, and a lot of Christian tradition has translated this phrase as faith in Jesus, that righteousness in God, and lots of other phrases like this in the Bible are faith in Jesus, that it's the object. But what if it's the possessive? And what if we're talking about, and we could better translate this phrase, Jesus's faithfulness, or Jesus's, which is another way of saying Jesus's faith. So is what we have, because of, this is a really critical like grammar thing that a lot of life is built on. Like a lot of places in the Bible, it'll say like gifts or grace is from faith, from pisteos Jesu. Does it come from faith in Jesus or Jesus's faithfulness, Jesus's faith? You can puzzle that out. The same thing with many other biblical phrases like love of God. Is that God's love for us? Does love of God mean God's love? God is the one loving? Or does it mean the love is directed toward God as the object? Do you see how that can make a big difference? And we kind of wish we had a distinction here because we've built a lot of theology around it. In English, we simplify it by kind of making a decision in the translation and translating it without this way that holds both. So what I'm saying is in the Greek, this holds all of those meanings, perhaps. But in English, because we often translate it like faith in Jesus, we lose some of that possibility of meaning. Why do Greek grammar and nouns matter? Well, part of it is also because we're going to start looking at how that helps us know how things go in the sentence. So we're going to start looking together really briefly at John 1 through 3. And so this is kind of we'll dip our toes into this a little bit for the beginning, for the next several sessions, as we grow in our confidence and start to learn about this. The Gospel of John, which is the fourth gospel in our Bible of 4, and it's really the easiest in terms of how it's written. And so some people say that the Gospel of John is Dick and Jane biblical Greek. Like it is very simple sentence structure. It is very easy. We're going to compare it to other authors in a couple sessions. But we start with this when we're learning Greek because it's short sentences and easy to read. However, it's deep theology. And so some people say that the Gospel of John is shallow enough for a baby to play in, but deep enough for an elephant to drown, because it's theologically deep, but is very easy linguistically. So we're going to start with the beginning of the Gospel of John, which is a text that we often revisit in our Christian year in the scriptures. and is theologically important, the beginning of this. A lot of Gospels, being the story of Jesus, start with a birth story, but John starts with this cosmic kind of setup, and it's a poem. But because Greek poems were written, paper is expensive and hard to come by, you wouldn't like write them out like we do versify English poetry. So they would just be written all compact like we looked at last time, just like anything else. But here we're going to start looking at John 1 and use this as an example for our pronunciation tonight as we start to dive our toes in with real parts of the Bible and also start to notice some nouns and articles and how they have endings. And so I know you don't have that chart in front of you. You don't need to memorize anything, but we're just going to be about noticing. Hey, I see that small word. Maybe that's the word for thee. Maybe that's that article. Or we're going to see some familiar words here. So let's try to pronounce this together. Let's take the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words before the comma. And just look at those for a moment. And does anybody, and try to pronounce them to yourself. And then I'm gonna see if anybody, because I've been doing a lot of talking, does anybody want to try to pronounce? Well, let's do this. I don't know if I can see, maybe if I open up the participant screen, I can see the hand raise function. And we can go in order, but then you have to be a quick trigger on the raise hand on your Zoom screen there. So if you open up your participants window, you could try it, or you could just, let's not do raise hand. That'll be too complicated. Let's just unmute and let's go one word at a time. I was going to do a phrase, but let's go one word at a time. Who wants to try the first word? It's a little word. First word.
N.
N. N. Next word.
RK.
RK. Good job, John. Thanks. Let's hear from other voices. NRK. Next word. So we had N, and now we have similar but different vowel sound.
Ain?
Ain, right. Ain, NRK, ain. And then we have that word for thee. What's the next word?
Oh.
Close. Ha. Ha. Got the like the rough breathing mark that way. So we see the difference between ain with its quote mark over it that opens that way. And then the difference between that and the next word, which has the quote over it going the other direction, which is the rough breathing mark, ha, ha. And then the next word is a noun, a familiar word we've seen.
Logos.
Yeah, logos. So if we're on this website, it'll help us out and we can see in. Now it's not going to be like word for word like you see in a English translation in sentences, because we're picking out word for word definitions. So in, beginning, and that'll also help us notice what words are missing here and we add in English. So there's no article here. It's just in beginning. In beginning, which of course mirrors how the beginning of the Hebrew Bible starts in Genesis 1:1. In beginning was, this is was, the logos. In beginning was the word. I'm gonna fast forward the next part for you and read it for you. Kai. Kai is an important word. It means and. Kai ha logos, and the word was with the God. Now that's interesting, right? We just translated as God in English. And the Word was with God. And this next part, let's have you guys chime in. Pronounce the next word for me? Maybe somebody who I haven't heard from, jump in and give a try.
Theos.
Yep, theos. And so, yeah. And right before that, somebody tell me the conjunction.
Kai.
Kai, thanks, Alex. Kai, theos. The next little word after theos. Who knows it?
Un?
Close. Yeah, ain. Good job. Ain. And then the next one is ha. And then again, logos. We're going to have a lot of repetition here. Kai, theos, ha, logos. For those of you who may be really familiar with this scripture, I wanted to point out that this might be a little bit, you might notice a difference. How do you think we would translate this? Kai means and God.
We say, and the Word was God instead of and God was the Word, don't we?
Yeah, we say in English translations, they always put it, and the Word was God. But we see here that the word order here in Greek is, and God was the Word. So it's interesting and a question of emphasis, and that I think we feel like it sounds awkward to say in English, and God was the Word. But it's also a theological difference, and the church, when English translations were coming along, they were trying to avoid certain outside the line beliefs, also known as heresies, and so they were trying to be very clear about the way they translated the word God and always make it the subject of the sentence whenever it could. Grammatically, this is a these are both nominative forms because they're equal because of the verb to be. They can be switched around, so the English translation is correct. It's just a little different. So I'm going to pause there and see what questions people have. Just in general, we've done a lot of Greek tonight. You should feel good about yourself, even if the grammar stuff, you're like, I don't know about all that. You guys read Greek tonight, and you read some real Greek scripture here. What questions do you have? Anything? All right. Let's try and let's go ahead and mute everybody else but me. And then I want to invite you, because we're going to try and practice this, and it'll help us with our speed and pronunciation. Not that we're playing a race, but it'll help us get used to the language to practice reading it. So let's try reading this first sentence again together. I'm going to start slow and then read it a little faster. So pronounce it along with me, but stay muted, please. NRK, ein, ha, logos, kai, ha, logos, ein, pros, ton, theou, kai, theos, ein, ha, logos. NRK, he, ha, logos, kai, ha, logos, ein, pros, ton, theon, kai, theos, ein, ha, logos. There's a little Greek. You did your first verse here, so good job for that. I want to put back up my slides and talk about the homework if you want to practice this week. The homework is web-based, and it will help you check your work. It's an online exercise, but I have a little bit different instructions here to help you out. There are these exercise links below. I'm going to click on one in a minute and show you. And this will all be linked in the email and with these directions, as well as all the slides from tonight will be uploaded in the morning with the video. So And this link below, you can find, what I want you to do is try to do two things. Just try to find the article, that little word that means the. And so you might do this by having up on one window on your computer that chart that we looked at a couple slides ago. And the article are all the blue words here, the little words that mean the. And then the second thing I want you to do is look for what part of speech or case they are. You don't need to know the vocab, you just can take a look at this. So let me make sure I'm sharing the correct screen. That's the wrong one, let me see. This is from a Bill Mounce's site. He has the textbook, one of the textbooks I've taught and learned with. And so these are warm-up exercises. You click one, and then it'll take you, I want to show you the other one that's linked first. It's a little easier. Go down, you don't have to go through this. These are directly linked on the slide. But, so you're gonna click this, click the example, and you'll see the Greek here, angelos kuriou. You don't see any small words there. So first thing, no articles there. Those are both nouns. Then we look and we see what part is the ending, the Omicron sigma and the Omicron upsilon. And this word means angel of the Lord. So this will just show you, you can just click through, see these examples, and you'll see and learn a little bit of different vocab and practice pronouncing them. A lot of them are kind of familiar things, like this one is ha kurios tu uranu, and kurios ha. So we have here, first thing, look for the article, the little words that mean the. We got two of them here, ha and tu. And then if we go down, we can click the text hint and see the endings that are highlighted for us. And then we can see the translation. This is the Lord, ha koros, of heaven. So there we go. So that's your link if you want to practice more between this week and next. Next week, we're going to talk about verbs and why they matter, and particularly for commands, because one of the questions that those of you who have been in Bible study with our GLC Bible study before, sometimes we've puzzled over what are commands in the scripture, what are stronger verbs that sometimes get translated as condemnation and things like that. And so we're going to look at the differences and what that might mean. The next time after that, we'll talk about the different authors of the Greek New Testament, look at more papyrus and examples from history, and how we notice that there are a lot of different authors in the Bible, in the Greek parts of the Bible, and they're not all the same. They might not all be who they say they are. And so we're going to talk about that on the fourth session. So thanks for your attention tonight. This is a lot of language again, but I hope it maybe shared something new with you and was a little fun too, trying out something new. So it's good to see everybody. Thanks for being here. Have a great night. Bye, guys. I'm going to stop the recording.